Hello, everyone. We are today very happy to have Professor Rahul Dé from Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, to talk about ChatGPT and its implications. Professor Dé contributed to this multi-author perspective paper that is published in IIM about a specific aspect of ChatGPT. And he's going to give some highlights and going to emphasize some important point from that aspect. And then we will come to question and answer. I have been joined with my colleague, Dr. Hagwal Malik, to converse with Professor Dé. So Professor Rahul Dé, welcome, and be looking forward to hear some important points from your contribution.
Thank you, Yogesh. Thank you, Tegwin. Pleasure to be here and be able to talk about this subject, which is consuming a lot of us, a lot of our energies. We have to deal with it literally on a day-to-day basis. So I'll just take a few minutes and say what I had to say in my contribution in this paper. When I was writing this back in January, ChatGPT had been around for like a couple of months. And of course, we were all experimenting. My students were, I was, we were looking at it. And that's when some initial ideas had come through. ChatGPT is an extension of earlier GPTs. I had been using an earlier version as homework assignments. So I was familiar with those. And this one, I said, well, what will it be? It will be a slightly better version of the first, but it turns out it is quite dramatically different. And that is when that thought came. Many of us who follow AI have been seeing this debate that goes whether so far we have always built artificial narrow intelligences, these AIs, which have very, very deep skills, but they're in a very narrow domain. So they can play chess brilliantly, but they wouldn't be able to play even one move in checkers. Or they can diagnose cancer, but they wouldn't be able to play chess. And so very narrow intelligences. And here was a program, interestingly, which could do a whole bunch of things very well. Not at the expert level, but at a very, very competent level. It could write an essay, could compose a poem, it could, it could write code, and many other things. I personally experimented with a certain kind of poetry called the ghazal, and it did not do a good job. It did not, but the actual poem that resulted was very, very well written. It was not a ghazal, but it was a good poem. So that's when I thought of these issues that would come up, because it is provided by a very large corporation with great resources. And just like many services on the internet, it was available for free, like a Google search engine. It was very easy to use. There was nothing to learn. I figured many people will start using this right away. It will become, and of course, people did that. So then some thoughts came, which I will just summarize very quickly. In developing countries, we do have computing issues. One of them is the digital divide, but I will come to that later on. Many people have access and many people don't have access. The more important thing is when you have such a powerful tool that shows up, of course, people are excited about it and they start using it for a lot of things. The fact that ChatGPT hallucinates and kind of makes up things that it is not able to answer clearly would lead to certain issues. For instance, if you do not know something about nuclear technology, it's been around for a while, but maybe in a developing country, you do not have much depth in nuclear technology. What can you do now? You can quickly go to ChatGPT and ask questions about it. And frankly, the way it answers, you'll begin to believe a lot of what it is saying. It seems to be highly authentic. And there it lies the problem. If we begin to believe, from high school children to experts, to people who are writing policy, if they start relying on this powerful tool, which seems so helpful and is so easily available, we may have a problem. One of the things that I think eventually governments will demand to know is that how did you build this stuff? Where did the data come from? And that is probably going to be a legislative issue. One of the other things that is important to know and keep in mind is that ChatGPT is built by very powerful corporations who have lots of money. It takes millions of dollars to train it once, and they actually train it many times to get to this level, which means only very large corporations with deep pockets or governments will be able to build tools like this. Small startups will never be able to do this. They'll be able to build on top of it, but not the core engine. And that is very important to keep in mind. Now, once you have this tool and you have this policy asymmetry coming up, every policy will kind of be informed by what has been published already, which is usually from the developing world. So our policy in countries like developing countries like India and other places will be driven strongly by this. Second part, now I'll come to this, the digital divide. Where you have a digital divide, I would say about 50% of the population in India still does not have clear access to the internet. It's patchy. Some things they have. Many people simply don't have smartphones. This creates a divide. Those who have smartphones and access to this will be leagues ahead in terms of what they will be able to do and say. There is a language divide also. Now I know ChatGPT runs in many languages, but it doesn't cover the gamut. Basically, if you are proficient in English, which is about 10 to 12% of India's population, you can use this comfortably. You can use this in other languages, but it does not have all the features. These two aspects will create a divide that worries me quite a bit. And the third point I made was actually about responsibility. If doctors start consulting ChatGPT, if engineers start consulting it, if other professionals start consulting it, and you get wrong answers, you do get wrong answers, there is a possibility we will have the same problem which has been troubling AI for a long time. Who is responsible when it produces an answer? And I think, and there needs to be research on this, I think the answer has to be equally shared. One cannot now blame the human entirely. Some of the responsibility has to shift to the AI also. So those are my three quick points. I'll pause here. Welcome with the questions.
Yes. I mean, yes, digital divide, obviously, and lots of people arguing that the technology has potential to help, but also, consequences can be much worse for those who doesn't have technology. So before they were disadvantaged, now we are arguing that, well, applications like these would not really, they will remove some jobs. They will, some job will be displaced, but then new job will be created. But those new job will require much more stronger competency than the jobs that were there. So that means those who doesn't have technology, that means who doesn't have access to these kind of system and skills, will be much more in negative situation, right?
Yeah, it's little nuanced there. On one hand, there were some people, I'll take the case of those who, make PowerPoints or make presentations in offices. They have a certain skill. Some of them are really good. They make very good PowerPoints. Now, we know that the Bing version of it, or the Microsoft Copilot, is actually helping you make PowerPoints. So what that will do is displace that person who may have been paid a little higher because she could do PowerPoints, replace it with a youngster who will charge less, who will run Copilot. So the displaced person is actually worse off. The replaced person is getting a lower salary and doing the same work. So yes, one side of it is that those who do not know this stuff at all will be worse off, for sure. The other side is there will be some set of people who know this stuff, but will get replaced because their job can be done by a person at a lower cost.
Actually, really interesting discussion around that digital divide, Rahul, as well, because I know you mentioned India, but here in Wales, we also have some issues around, believe it or not, infrastructure when it comes to the internet and broadband in many parts of rural Wales. And so we also have a digital divide in many ways. Also, businesses have problems, therefore connecting and all the rest of it. But also what I'm also interested in, we're talking about that digital divide and the negative side of things. But what about for those maybe who are digitally limited, maybe is maybe the right term, I'm not sure, where they have some ability digitally, and this use of the ChatGPT then as a tool, which, like you said, it's so easy to communicate with. You don't have to learn anything to use it. You can just use it. So for some, it may be used as a tool when they're digitally limited to actually empower them to learn something in a very conversational, step-by-step, logical manner, in a way they can talk to it or not feel embarrassed to go to somebody, ask for help on, upgrading their digital skills. I mean, what are your thoughts around that, Rahul?
I fully agree. I fully agree. So it will help people who like young students who may be shy, who may actually have some disabilities, who may find it difficult to go to a teacher or go to a friend or even go to a senior who will help them out. They will easily access this. They will find it much more useful. I think we saw this with the Alexa. Those who are shy, don't like interacting with people, they would spend hours with Alexa. No problem at all. And I think I was just reading in Nobel's book. She has a very good book out now where she was talking about how certain children with the autistic spectrum disorder benefited heavily by just talking to Alexa, who would answer very patiently the hundreds of questions they fire at them, whereas we humans would get tired. So there I see a very strong potential that the ChatGPT type of tools will be extremely helpful. I fully agree with you.
Rahul, I mean, if we take what you think is the most important challenge posed by generative AI to institutions, and what is the most important challenge for the individual, in your view? Any, yeah.
Yeah, I won't be able to generalize for educational institutions, and I can speak on that with some knowledge because I'm dealing with it on a daily basis. The challenge is how you integrate within your education environment this extremely powerful device, which is uncertain. For some, it gives brilliant answers. In other case, it hallucinates. It just makes up answers. And more importantly, how do we tell our students how to begin to use this responsibly and carefully? That part is a tough one for us. Very difficult.
And
First,
sorry. I was just going to say that in terms of integrating it, how to integrate it, is it possible to integrate without shaking up the existing system and processes? Or you think that in order to integrate this, we do need to rethink how we do things, at least in educational institution?
Yes, we do need, I agree with the latter part. We do need to rethink a lot of things. I'll take a simple example. I wrote this today. Once you give an assignment, we have to assume that people will use ChatGPT. We say it openly. We assume you use it. Right now, we're saying, please cite it. If you have used it, just cite it. Say that, this is what I got from ChatGPT. This may not work. People may just say, no, I went ahead and did this. So we have to rethink our whole notions of original work, plagiarism, what constitutes the honest labor. We also have to rethink examining students.
Yeah.
How do you, ensure that what they're doing is what they know?
Yes.
I think it will come to a point where students will turn around and say, you examine me, but with ChatGPT.
Yes. Yeah, probably, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you get a calculator. 50 years ago, we said, okay, students can use calculators in classroom. They'll say, yeah, I'll use it. You examine me.
It's
So-
really interesting, actually, because, part of my concern, I guess, is students are definitely using it and misusing it.
Mhm.
I'm not so sure academics on the whole, if they're outside of tech kind of ways of thinking or AI interest, like us, I'm not so sure they're all embracing it as quickly as our students. So at this rate, the students are going to be ahead of us if we're not careful. But I think one of my biggest concerns is the risk of over-reliance of our students on this really nice tool, frankly, and teaching them how to use it safely and wisely and mindfully, because otherwise we're going to have graduates from our institutions who are overusing this tool, over relying on it, and not really thinking for themselves. Going into the world of work, what are we equipping them with? But at the same time, they need to use it.
Yes, that dilemma is bothering me. We at our institution, we ran a vote. And I asked our colleagues in a faculty meeting, I gave three options. First, we ban this tool, which means we say, no, we're not using it. And we get written, statements from students saying they will not use it. That is an extreme case. Then we said, okay, we discourage. We say, okay, don't use it. And we generally don't want you to. Some things you can use, but basically don't use it. And the third option was embrace it. Say, okay, we know you're going to use it. We can't stop it. Let's see how we can work with this. So overwhelming majority voted for embrace. It was a huge, I couldn't believe it. The numbers when they showed up on Mentimeter, it was massive. So the choice was very clear. We have to embrace. What I'll add to your comment, which is very interesting, is that this tool will grow and evolve. It is on that exponential part of the curve. So version 5, 6, and I think Yogesh was saying this, is just going to be, leagues ahead of 4. Now, what that means, I'm actually not able to visualize right now.
Yeah, the speed is so fast, it's so difficult to comprehend. The time is not enough to comprehend that what kind of changes it may cause. And also the technology, because we don't know until the technology being implemented or made available, that what is the power of that. So basically, only when it's available, you see what it is.
Exactly.
So that's the actually, and also whatever technology we have, I mean, it's kind of black box. So we don't know. We're getting the answer, but we don't know where it is coming from. What kind of content they have used to train these systems, and so you can try to make prediction if you know all these aspects. But if you don't know any of these, then next version could be very different. We have no idea. No.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So Rahul, what I'm so interested to kind of talk about briefly, in your view, I mean, given this is now opening so many avenues for everything, for practice, for policy, for research, what research directions, what do you think, if young colleague want to examine related to ChatGPT, what research issues you see that would be worthwhile examining? I mean, in my view, loss are there, but what are some of those that you feel appropriate to examine?
I would focus more on the aspects where it is interfacing with human tasks. Given that we know it's a neural net, I don't know how much we can understand it. We cannot. It's just a bunch of weights out there. That research, there will be people doing it. They'll try to build models out of it. I would go do a lot of work on the specific aspects where it is interfering or assisting, one can say, with human work, whether it's in the financial markets, whether it's in medicine, in any vertical, in design, in creativity. There is one clear trend we are seeing. We've seen this with technology, adoption over the years. This is well known, that dependence grows. We begin to depend more and more on this. With that dependence, we are gaining some skills, we are losing some skills. That's also bound to happen. That is for sure. We have to now, in a way, it is very exciting to be, still active as a researcher at this time, because this phenomena is overwhelming. It's like a tsunami that's washing over us. We have to understand in what ways the whole world of work and the way we interact with technology is changing. It's huge.
Yeah, and also, I mean, there is just a assumption. I know this is a great tool, and it creates good content and all those kind of things. But is it really helpful? I mean, when we're creating, can you directly use what you're creating, or you have to really, go through, scrutinize, and do? Is this whole process, would that be actually effective? If you compare with just doing by yourself, So first thing is, obviously we cannot take away the risk that it may produce things that might not be correct, might be something contagious, So in order to ensure that, you have to obviously then work out, you have to examine what you have produced and if it is good enough or not. So you have to put the effort for that, right? So I think lots of work might be needed to just kind of compare the human task and human output and what produced by the ChatGPT, and see if it is really worthwhile, or you just using it because everyone's talking about it.
Absolutely. There's that interesting story about how they used a generative AI to compose some Bach sonatas, and they played it at a place where people were very, they were into Bach and they were big fans of Bach, and many people came and played their compositions, and one of the composition was generated, and that was also played, and people loved it. And then they were told, oh, that was by a machine, by a generative AI. And then the audience said, oh, that's terrible. Oh, it is really awful. so, so they switched around and said, no, 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 we don't like that. So all these amazing, issues related to the creative works, what we humans have always cherished, creative works, music, painting, writing. We just love this stuff. Now, if it is produced by a generative AI, I am intrigued. Why do we say it's so bad? I haven't got it. There is something we associated with. I think it has to do with human abilities, which are limited. So we really appreciate a person who can produce music so beautifully.
It also comes down to perception as well, I think, because maybe it'd be interesting to know what happens if you switched it around. So told the people that this is generated by AI when it wasn't, and vice versa, and see if they still think the same thing, because that would show it would be their perception that is skewing how they're feeling about that output.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, this would be a
Thank you so much, Rahul.
Yeah.
Thank you for obviously giving this time. I know that you must be busy with other things afternoon. So we had very nice conversation. Some of these anxieties that we have touched upon. And obviously, your contribution is in the paper. If someone like to get more details of it, they can always read. So thank you so much. If you like to say anything specific, anything important to the audience?
No, nothing. Thank you for inviting me, giving me this chance. And I think the paper came out very well and very timely. And I think many other journals are also coming up with special issues. All I will say is, for us, this community, these are exciting times to be in.
Yes, yes.
Very exciting times.
Yeah. I fully agree. And actually, before our paper, several editorial and opinion piece written, but they were very short, like 2 pages, 1 pages, and just kind of touching upon one aspect very briefly or other aspect. The difference between those paper and this one is that it brought, it converged the perspective from so many different people. And,
exactly.
And that made it richer, in my view.
Absolutely, so, absolutely. Yeah. It's got a very wide set of opinions, which is wonderful.
Yeah. So, and I think people will find something in this paper for them to use for one region or other, not just for research, even for teaching, even for when discussing the policy, because we have talked about barriers, negative and positives. So hopefully people will find something useful and they will use. But thank you so much, Rahul.
Thank you.
We are very grateful for your time and for your input in this video. With this, let me just